that movie was ass. Like, now, what's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning into the Couch Media Corp channel again. My name is Andres, and we're back on the blue couch. And I'm gonna change up the format for this a little bit because I don't want to spend too much time talking about the movie. But yeah, Morbius. Man, I'm gonna probably start off by saying that the movie isn't as bad as the people are saying it is online, like critics and stuff like that. I don't think it deserves, I think it's like at a 17 or something like that on Rotten Tomatoes. The movie is definitely bad, but it's not that bad. It's not worse than Wonder Woman 84. Wonder Woman 84 is probably the worst movie ever. I think you've heard me say that a lot on this channel, but I truly believe that. And it's definitely more enjoyable than that movie. It's probably, I think, like on the tomato meter or whatever meter you want to go by, it's probably like a 50 or yeah, like a 50% movie. Like, it's not that bad, but it's bad, you know what I mean? So far, Sony Spider-Verse is like 0-3 for me, man. Like, I haven't enjoyed not one of them. Venom was horrible. Carnage was even worse, and then this movie is like almost as bad as those two. Like, man, I think the Sony Spider-Verse is killing itself by not having Spider-Man in it. Like, that's like the biggest issue, I think, for me, man. Like, these movies are trying to be bigger than what they are, and the whole point of these villains are Spider-Man, you know? Like, most of these villains exist because of Spider-Man. Morbius a little less, but Venom is definitely exists because of Spider-Man. But yeah, I feel like so far these three movies that they've released have been identical in terms of tone, in terms of story, in terms of like characters. I don't know, it's weird. Like, the tone of Morbius was like all over the place. It was trying to be an action movie, it was trying to be an MCU movie, it was trying to be like almost had horror elements in it, and then it was like just goofy as hell out of nowhere. So like the tone was all over the place. I feel like the writing was obviously bad because it made the actors seem like they were not bad actors, but it was like almost like, who cares about any of these characters? You know, like it just felt like there was 4 people cast in the entire movie and nothing else existed. Jared Leto's performance was okay. It wasn't like nothing spectacular. Matt Smith's performance as Milo, or Loxius, whatever you want to call him, it was okay. Like, it was decent, but it just felt out of place, like with the tone of the movie. He was just so bright and animated, and then everybody else was kind of like dead on the inside. I don't know what it was, but he just felt out of place in the whole movie. And he even had a scene in the movie where he was like dancing and like in front of a mirror, like, you know, checking himself out because he had like this new gained confidence because he has like the same powers Morbius has, and it just felt so fucking weird and out of place. Like, I think like the scene like 5 minutes before that was literally legit a horror scene, and then like the next scene is him dancing in front of a mirror like to some fucking techno shit. Like, it was just super out of place, and it felt weird to me. Adria's performance as Martine was also like blah, like who cares? It wasn't spectacular either. Tyrese and Al Madrigal as like those two cops was like almost useless in the movie. Like, they didn't like progress the story or anything. It was just like kind of gave me like some old school vibe where like something happens and then the cops come like, scene, like, a crime scene, da, 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 and like it trying to like re-explain what we just saw like 10 seconds ago, like, oh, Morbius killed this guy, da, 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 you know, like it was like that usual detective obvious bullshit that they're speaking, and they didn't really solve shit in the movie. They were just like regular ass people just showing up to a fucking crime scene. I don't know, man. These movies suffer from like I said previously, suffer from trying to be bigger than what they are. Like, they try to make these characters fucking huge and like flesh out a story of like these characters that are kind of like side characters, you know? Like, these characters really aren't that big without Spider-Man, you know? So it's weird for them to be like that much in the limelight because we really don't know much about them, and then they're like trying to build like a big ass story around them and shit. I feel like all the Sony Spider-Verse movies have been very cookie cutter, Like, we always start off with the character before they get their power or whatever the case may be, where they're like struggling and either like a loser or like, you know, certain shit like that. Like, they're just struggling with their own demons. And then, granted, this is like most superhero films are like this. There needs to be a struggle in the beginning, then they get the powers and they awaken and face the villain or whatever. But in these movies, it just feels like it's not executed well. Like, it just feels like, who cares, you know? Everything's rushed. And like, second act, the hero or anti-hero gets their power and they're testing it and they're using it, and then in that same kind of act, the villain of the movie is like, oh look, I want what he has. In the case of Venom 1 is Riz Ahmed's character, he wants what Tom Hardy's character wants. He wants a symbiote. And then in Venom 2, Woody Harrelson's character wants what Tom Hardy's character wants. He wants a symbiote too. He wants to be Carnage or whatever. And then in this movie, Jared Leto's friend, Milo, wants what Morbius has. Like, he wants to be cured just like Morbius. He wants to have the powers just like Morbius. So like, everything is the same. Nothing changes. And then it's like the third act where the villain of the villain becomes the same person as the main character, you know? Venom, you got Riz Ahmed becoming Riot, and then you have two symbiotes fighting. And then Venom 2, you got Woody Harrelson becoming Carnage, and then there's two symbiotes fighting. And then this movie, you have Milo becoming Hunger, and he's the same exact person as Morbius. Like, that's the problem with these Sony Spider-Verse movies. Like, I feel like there's no difference between the villain and the anti-hero, whatever you want to call them. It's just mirror matches, like, pretty much the whole movie. It's just like, I feel like it's just lazy, you know? Like, they're just creating the same. The villain of the movie is the same as the hero, so like, it's weird. Like, there's no stakes, or like, it's just weird choices. Like Morbius's choices throughout the movie. Like, in the beginning of the movie, he's like hell-bent on finding a cure, and like, he has this little girl as a patient in the hospital, and like, she's dying or she has some type of sickness, and then finds a cure or whatever, and then he becomes Morbius, and then like, half of the movie is like him struggling with that. And then Matt Smith's character Milo, he finds he gets a batch of Morbius's fucking power or whatever you want to call it, and then like, they're fighting at the third act. And then like, at the end of the movie, Morbius just like totally forgets about his like work, and like totally forgets about the girl that was in the hospital, the little girl that he was one of his patients. Like, totally forgets about that and his mission and all that shit. Like, he just like progressively went downhill as a doctor and became like just a fucking nothing. He became nothing. Like, there was no growth to his character. Like, he just fucking did nothing. This movie was a lot of nothing, man. But I don't know, it just felt like empty. Like, none of this stuff mattered that was happening in the movie. It's weird. One thing I do want to give it credit for was the graphics. I know a lot of people complain about the graphics and like bad CGI, and honestly, I don't know what they're talking about. The movie, like, the graphics alone, they looked amazing. Like, they looked awesome. I don't know what people were looking at. It felt like it looked super real to me, honestly. Some of those scenes. And the aesthetic of the movie was actually pretty good too. It had like a pretty good filter on it. It wasn't like bright as shit and saturated. I thought it looked pretty good. Now, granted, saying the CGI did look good, but some of those, I'd say, I don't know, artistic choices for the CGI was a little weird. And what I mean by that is like, the look of Morbius's powers were cool, but I felt like they were used kind of too much. So like, Morbius, whenever he used his powers, he would get almost like a dust, like wind-like effect, like streaks whenever he would use his power. But I felt that was kind of weird because that's what the whole world saw, you know? Like, it would have been cool if that's how Morbius portrayed his own powers, but that's how the world saw him. Whenever he moved, they saw him like leave trails of like, you know, his self, and like trails of like dust, like almost an after image of himself every time he used the power or something like that, which was kind of weird. I kind of wish like they used that for when Morbius was alone and like using his powers alone, and that's kind of how he perceived the world around him. but it wasn't the case. So it kind of made it weird for like the choice of aesthetics for Morbius's powers. And then also like some of the action scenes in the third act was like fucking like so convoluted that you didn't know what the fuck was happening. Especially when like Milo and Morbius started fighting. Some of those action scenes where they're like in a tussle, that shit was like, you could not see what was going on. The only reason you could see what was going on because they had slowed them down with slow motion, like for the audience to see what was happening, and then it would speed up, and then it'll go back into that like confusion. And then I don't know, man, it's just weird. Seeing all this stuff without Spider-Man is like, who gives a fuck, man? And then like they kind of like, even in the post-credit scene was like, the both of them were horrible, man. Like, and it messed up the MCU version of like Spider-Man. Like, spoiler alert, obviously, but the end credit scene, the first one is just Michael Keaton's character, the Vulture. Basically in Spider-Man No Way Home, when they open up the multiverse and all that stuff and they closed it back up, Vulture, who was in the MCU, now blipped into the Sonyverse, and he was like blipped into like an empty cell, and then now he's in the Sony Spider-Verse. So like now, what does that mean? You know, like now Spider-Man has no villains in the MCU. You know, like that's horrible. I guess he'll have his own villain or whatever, maybe. And then the second end credit scene is probably even worse because like it shows like Morbius like going to like a remote location, almost like if you plan the meeting with Vulture, and then Vulture comes out of nowhere and he says like, oh, I've been watching your work and all this, la la la, we should do a teamwork, we should do it like a team up, we could do a lot of good in this world. And it's weird too, because like Morbius, the whole movie, he was like just trying to do good and trying to not be a villain, and like he was like mortified that he thought he had killed the nurse in the movie, so he was trying to be actually a good guy. And then the post-credit scene comes, the second post-credit scene comes, and he's like almost agreeing with like Vulture, like, yeah, let's do some shit. Like, you know, I don't know if he's like being tricked by Vulture or he's like wants to be a villain. I don't know what the fuck that shit was about. It's so stupid. And I guess like they're trying to set up the villains first and then introduce their Spider-Man. I don't know which Spider-Man is gonna be in that world. I don't know if there's gonna be Tom Holland Spider-Man. I don't know if it's gonna be Andrew Garfield or Tobey Maguire that are gonna go up against this Sony Spider-Verse Sinister Six. So like I don't know what the hell is going on. It's like a giant mess when it comes to the fucking Sony Spider-Verse, man. And then you got like the Kraven movie coming up, and like what the fuck is that shit gonna be about? You know, like Kraven's like whole thing is to be like the greatest hunter in the world, and then like his like best prize would be like hunting Spider-Man, and like Spider-Man doesn't exist in this world, so who the fuck is he gonna be hunting? You know, like it does have a pretty good cast, like Aaron Taylor Johnson and Russell Crowe's in it, so that, I mean, that should be okay, but I don't know, it might not be. Who knows like, how the story is gonna be, or like what direction they're taking that character in if Spider-Man doesn't exist in this world. So I don't know, it's just like the whole Sonyverse is just like a cash grab, and like they're honestly hurting themselves by like not including Spider-Man in this world, man. It's so fucking horrible. I don't know, Morbius was definitely a bad movie, but you know, I suggest watching it, getting your own opinion about it, because you know, I don't like how critics like doom a movie just because they don't like it. It's all fucking opinion based at the end of the day. So go watch the movie, see what you think about it, but I definitely didn't like that shit. That shit was whack to me. It wasn't the worst movie ever, but it was definitely bad. And it just like made me not excited to see the rest of this world, like this universe. So I'm gonna watch it obviously because I like watching every movie, but I'm definitely not excited for any of the Sonyverse the Spider-Verse movies in the Sony world. I think they should figure out something like ASAP when it comes to like giving all the rights from Sony to Marvel, because this whole universe is gonna be trash. I feel it already. But yeah, I don't know. Let me know what you guys thought in the comments below. I didn't want to take too much time talking about it because I really don't care much about the movie. But if you guys have seen it, let me know what you guys thought about it. Probably like my final rating for the movie is probably like a 5 out of 10. Not a good movie, but definitely not Wonder Woman level. 84, I mean, because Wonder Woman 1 was dope, but Wonder Woman 84, that shit was like a fucking 2. It was unwatchable. But yeah, let me know what you guys thought about the movie in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel. If you're new here, I would appreciate it. And if you stayed this long into the video, consider giving it a thumbs up. I'd appreciate that a lot, and that helps the channel a lot too. So yeah, Morbius, trash. Let's see what other trash Sony comes up with next. But until we meet again on the next video, people, peace.